Hey,
Good.
Marcie, great to. I met you briefly, but it's good to meet you here on Zoom. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, I'm honored. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we met at the alumni event last year when
Yeah.
I received my award, which is
Yes.
there behind me. It was a very, very special night for me. Hard to explain, but it was an extremely special night for me.
Yeah. Before we hit record, you said some nice things about you didn't realize how big of a deal it was to get this award, and then when you were there,
Yeah,
it kind of hit you.
yeah, that's right. I had no idea. And what also, first of all, I brought a few friends, close friends, and they got to share in the event. And I was so touched by quite frankly, the achievements of the other award recipients
Mm.
that were at the podium that night with me. And because of COVID, it was smaller and intimate, which was really nice. And I loved it. I love being on the hill anyway. I love being up there. Makes me feel like I'm 23 again. Who doesn't
Yeah.
want that?
Everyone I've talked to shares the same thing about the school, how it's smaller, and we have, of course, that family theme, but it really
Right.
does feel like a family
That's right. Right.
for life, right?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. And we have a good sized alumni group out here in Los Angeles, which has been nice, really nice to
Yeah.
get to know some folks here. And they're from um, 15 plus years graduated before me and 15 years ahead of me. And yet that common thread, not just Framingham State, but, Boston and New England is all there. And uh, some of the things that connect us are the things that brought us to Framingham State in the first place, right?
Yeah.
That kind of, working man school, right?
Yeah.
I always say that we wore our waitress uniform to class.
Yeah.
I mean, we have that in common, right? We didn't come from wealthy, privileged families, generally speaking, right? We got out of public high schools and we were in working class families and we had to earn our way through school. Some of us, like myself, took 4.5+ years to get there because we were balancing jobs and responsibilities at home. So some of us have achieved, greater heights in our careers, right? And live in a different economy today. But that's what connects us.
Yeah. Doesn't that really show the epitome of what college is? We mentioned just education and getting a degree, but you talked about working outside of college and working hard to achieve, well, to pay for it and to get
That's
through
right.
school. So
That's right.
maybe Framingham State is kind of more reality and realistic of what college is.
Well, I think so. It was
Yeah.
for me. And what I
Same for
hear
you.
from
Yeah.
from Eric, well, keep referring to Eric, one of my favorite people who runs the alumni office there, and connected with me and brought me back to Framingham State. Yeah, one of the things that we talk about, what I talk about is we get so much experience there at Framingham State, right?
Yeah.
It isn't just your dorm life, your class life and the library. It's more than that, right? It's
Sure.
in most cases, it's working your way through school and connecting with other students who are also working their way through school. And then when we come out, right, when we graduate, I think we have had more real life experience. It wasn't this kind of um, you know, uh, just our college years, right? Just that
Sure.
fun of college years. We had more than that there. So I think we do. I think we come out with a lot more than that. And one of the things I'll jump into, one of the things that I talked about in an interview recently, a radio interview on Boston radio recently, was that when I talk to graduates or soon to be graduates from Framingham State College who probably self-funded their education, they'll be up against applicants from more privileged colleges, right? Of course they will. right?
Sure.
There'll be people from, Boston and Northeastern up for the same jobs. And I say, lean into that other thing that you accomplished. Lean into the fact that you self-funded your education. It might have taken you 4.5, 5 years. You have a multi-generational household. You took care of grandparents. You took care of, small younger sisters and brothers or children, right? Lean into that. That's a story. That's a story that recruiters and employers want to hear, should want to hear.
Yeah.
But I think it's as important as your grades. One of the gentlemen, and I don't recall his name, that received an award with me that night, he owns an ad agency, and he built a I think, $1 million homeless resident facility out there in Metro West, I think. But the most important part of this of his story for me was that when he moved his big ad agency from Boston to Metro West, he started to hire interns from Metro West.
Yeah.
Right?
Remember that story? Yeah.
Right. And he said, I almost get teary when I tell this story. I wish I could say it as well as he did. But he said that they were the best employees and interns he had ever had. He would never, ever trade them from some of the students from the more privileged schools in Boston. And if he had to do it all again, he would, go right to hiring them.
Yeah.
I give credit. I admire people that can get into and afford more privileged schools. But I will tell you, there is great value in how hard we had to work our way through that school. Hard to get into it, and it's hard to work into it. And that's why I fund a scholarship.
And we appreciate that. Yeah.
For kids who need a little help, and I fund and I help, support and regularly donate to the alumni office, because by supporting them, I hope that it will bring more alumni from, like me, more graduates, more people who have had some success. I don't care in what industry or field, that can come back and share their story and help them get a leg up. Give them 10 fingers, as we say, right? Give them 10 fingers.
Well, we hope a lot of kids currently are watching this because they would be very interested where you work, because they probably listen to your app religiously.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I don't want to be hearing the S word. I want to be here. I want to be talking about Pandora.
That's
right?
a great campaign. That should be your
The
the next
S
Super Bowl ad. We don't want to hear the S word. Just
If only. If I
Yeah.
said it to my family, my nieces and nephews. There'll be none of that around me.
yeah.
I will tell you a little bit about my career, okay, and the miracles that came my way. But I worked in broadcast radio for 20-something years in Boston, LA, San Jose, San Francisco, back to Boston for 4 years with a great radio group, and then back to Los Angeles, where I've been for the last 20 years. But I worked in broadcast radio for great companies, iHeartRadio, and Disney and CBS. I mean, the best, and big brands, the #1 radio station in a lot of markets, The Wave in Los Angeles, and Magic 106.7 and WBOS in Boston.
Great station. Yeah.
I know. And I worked for great people, and I worked around and with great people. So 12 years ago, when Pandora got started, and they weren't even an app yet on a mobile phone, they were just on our laptops. They started to play audio commercials, and they knew, the few people that had founded that company had figured out that this thing is going to be radio, right?
Yeah.
One day, right? Personalized radio, offered something better than broadcast radio, than AM/FM radio could ever provide. For the first time ever, you could tell it what you wanted to hear. You couldn't pick up the phone and call the program director at WBCN and say, play a little more of that and don't play any of that, right? And for the first time you could, and it was your radio station you could build. So when they realized this thing was radio, and we wanted to sell audio commercials instead of just display ads, they hired a few folks like me who had experience in that, in the audio industry, but also great relationships in the audio industry. So we were able to go find out where that money was, and make us into a radio company, right? Make us into an ad-supported radio company. Some of our friends in the field, like the S word, some of our friends in the field, they are predominantly subscription-based, and that's how they monetize, right?
Yeah.
$7, $10 a month. We also have an ad-free experience, but not a lot of our audience listens that way. Most of our audience listens to us because it's free, right? Only a couple of commercials an hour, and they're targeted to you because when you signed up and registered, you told me you were a male, and you told me how old you are, and you told me where you live. So you'll never get an ad for women's deodorant, right? You're only going to get ads that are compelling to you. So we hope it's still a good experience, ad supported, and of course brands and ad agencies and advertisers love it because they can reach a highly engaged audience. But I'll tell you what's important. What's important is that I had offline media experience. Myself and thousands of my closest friends were selling radio, and we saw the digital space light up overnight, light up the skies, and we were knocking on the door and couldn't get in. And I got very, very lucky that Pandora had really needed people like me to tap in and help them grow in the radio space. So it was luck. It was being in the right place in the right time. But the number one reason was because someone I had worked for before, and we both were crazy about each other and worked well together, and I had been successful for him and vice versa. He got in first and opened the door, and then I could open the door for others and for others. And one of the things I want to talk about today to the students that are listening is how important those business relationships are. 10, 12 years ago, probably there was no such thing as LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And today there is LinkedIn. And I wish I had thought of it. Damn it. It's another one of those things I wish I had thought of. But linking in was always, for me, the most important thing that I could do, right? At any job, at any business exchange, at any cocktail party, anywhere I was, I always wanted to know, what do you do for a living? What do you do? What does your mother do? What does your father do? What do your cousins do, right? I could learn more about somebody else's industry that maybe I wasn't in or didn't know anything about. And chances are high possibility we're going to run into each other in the future, or we can help each other out or help out somebody, that we know. So I want to, if I can, make an impact on how not only you use LinkedIn, but how you link in personally, right? You don't have a lot of time on your hands as a junior and senior in college, particularly when you are, like we talked about, self-funding your education. But volunteer work, for me, is one of the most important things you can do. First of all, when we look outside ourselves and help others, right? Yeah. It helps us grow, and it helps us, gratitude, of course, is my favorite word, and helps us live a fuller life and be better people. But it also allows you to connect with people you probably wouldn't connect with otherwise in your life, right? You might be at the food pantry in Southborough on a Saturday morning stacking boxes next to a woman who's 75 years old, and you might think you're going to have nothing in common with them until you ask them what, about their grandchildren and what they're doing. And oh, they live in Los Angeles, they're in the film business. Oh, that's really interesting, right? Things like that. So besides just making us feel better and filling filling ourselves with gratitude and being better people, it also, I think, sorry about that, I just had something pop up. It also expands our network, right? Yeah. It helps us expand our network. I don't know if that makes any sense. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think vice versa. I think even for myself, who's closer to 50, I've learned a lot from people in their 20s. And I always say, don't be afraid to, I think when I was younger, maybe older people didn't want to listen. You didn't want to listen to what the younger person had to say. Now that I'm older, I love talking to people 19, 20 and learning from them. You can learn from anybody. It doesn't matter what age you are. And especially in the world we live in now, I've been inspired by many people that are in their 20s. I think they're fantastic.
Such a great thing that you just brought up, because one of the things that happened to me, right, when I left radio, I've been in radio 25 years. I was often the smartest person in the room, right? Yeah. Ask Marcie. Marcie might know. She'll have the answer, right? When I got to Pandora, the opposite was true. And when I say they were younger than me, they were younger than me. Yeah. And I was no longer the smartest person in the room. In fact, the opposite was true. And the best thing I could do was shut up and listen, right? And it was such a learning experience for me, Michael, like you just said, such a learning experience for me to find out that I don't know anything about this, right? Space. I can learn, and here's a free education. I could have gone to UCLA and gotten a graduate degree in digital media. That would have cost me a lot of money and a lot of time. Or I could sit in these conference rooms and shut up and listen to the smartest bunch of people I had sat amongst. And why were they so smart? Because they grew up with it.
Yes.
Right? Like I grew up with an AM FM radio in my car and hit a button and changed the station, right? I walked across Framingham State College. I didn't have a cell phone in my hand, right?
Yeah.
In fact, we hadn't even, the smartphone hadn't crossed anybody's mind yet. So it's intuitive, it's innate to people younger than I am, and I have had I've been grateful to be able to learn from them. So you're right about that. You're right.
Yeah.
You know?
I
Yeah.
also believe in doing things that make you feel uncomfortable. I really, yeah.
Right. Welcome to my world of discomfort in 2009. When I would sit in these rooms and I would hear people talk, and I would take little notes. I would scribble down little notes of words that I had never heard of before, and I figured I could go home and look them up
Yeah.
rather than ask. And I remember writing down the word "the cloud," and I'm thinking to myself, man, this company's really cool because they store shit in a cloud, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I never like to think in the future, but I can't help it with everything that's going on now with all the streaming TV and all and everything.
Right.
And I wonder what the future, even in video games and all that. I mean, think
Right.
about 30 years, what the landscape of media. Do you ever think about that, or do you try
I
not?
think about it all the
Yeah.
time. And you know who else thinks about it is advertisers. Because even TV is paid for. Advertiser can't reach me on Netflix, right? Advertiser, I don't know if they can reach you on paid Hulu, or they can't. Some of the digital streaming sites, besides the S word, there are others that are growing a little bit. Amazon and Apple and Google Play,
Yeah.
right? And you can't reach them. So what advertisers are, that's what keeps them up at night. I'm curious about it. And that's also what I talk to students about is Wayne Gretzky used to say, go where the puck is going, right? Is what's next? And there are great, websites. I think it's TechCrunch or some of those, like, what's next? Who's getting funding today? Right? When somebody comes to me and knocks on my door and they say they want to get into, Pandora, I want to help them. I want to do what I can for them, but also, what's the next Pandora, so to speak, right?
Sure.
Like you said, what comes after digital streaming? I don't know, but there's engineers out there smarter than me working on it right now.
Yeah. It's really exciting to see. I do think the time we live in now, I know that it's easy to get overwhelmed with everything, but I think it's great. I mean, the fact that we can have content on Sirius with all those channels, I listen to NFL radio religiously and Howard religiously. And, it's like you said. And then I've made a lot of channels off of Pandora, like right off of Sirius. You can just make it and it automatically, that's right. What's really cool. Yeah.
That's right. And who's going to develop, the next thing is the consumer, right?
Yeah.
Like, as I said earlier, AM FM was not meeting the needs of the consumer, right? Satellite radio is invented. Then what can be better than that? My personalized, something I can build, my own version of jazz.
Yeah.
Right? In comes digital streaming. So what the audience asks for, the engineers are going to be working on.
Gotcha. That's a good point. Yeah.
That's what I think.
So what they want. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, okay. Lastly, this is the sales pitch for someone that wants to attend Framingham State. I know. What would you tell them why they should go?
Oh God. As I look at that picture behind you, it's such a pretty campus.
It is beautiful. Yeah.
It's just a beautiful campus. And I would say, for me, it was all those cool things at my fingertips that I wasn't expecting when I drove on that campus and I found there was a radio station, right?
Yeah.
There was a newspaper. I think there was a TV station at the time. There was even a bar, the Ramsden Pub, which is no longer. But I will tell you that I was one of The first year I was a bartender at the Ramsden pub. I still have the green polo shirt.
Oh, nice.
Can't can't part with it. All the things on there, all the things there at your fingertips, you know, hearing that, was it the Danforth Museum?
Yeah.
Right. That y'all purchased the Danforth Museum and for art history, and the Warren Center for hospitality industry, right? That stuff is there for you, and it's a small enough campus that there isn't a crowd of 1,000 people waiting to get in the door of the radio station ahead of you. I mean, literally, I walked in and said, you know, can I do that? Can I play? You know, can I do this too? And they said, come on in, turn the mic on, it's your turn, right? There's a lot to be said for that smaller community, right? Than I think certainly a UMass Amherst, but a lot of the schools there in Boston. It's a level playing field with those of us who got out of you know, public schools and from working class families, like I had mentioned before, and are gonna, you know, work hard through college and might not be on a 4-year program because we have to earn our money this semester for next semester. And if we're a little short, we're gonna take a semester off, right? And that's okay at Framingham State. Not only is it okay, it's kind of expected.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons. I think it's a family. It's still a family for me. It's still a family for me today. You know, I'm going to tell you a great story, okay, about networking. So I was talking to you about LinkedIn, you know, and how I long before LinkedIn was invented, and I didn't have a name for it, but that networking was so important to me. And I knew it was going to have payoff, and it always did. No matter where I was working, I made sure that I built great relationships with everybody around me. I'm in maybe a sales assistant down in this department, but I made sure I ran down in the newsroom. Who are the guys in the newsroom at CBS Radio? What are they doing? How did they get where they're going, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. So I'm in Cannes at the Cannes Film Festival a number of years ago. And I'm there because, you know, a friend of a friend is there. In a way, one could say that I had no business at all being on the red carpet at Cannes, but I was. And there's this place called the American Pavilion, which is a really cool tent where Americans can go and kind of network and have a drink and have lunch and get online, things like that. It's called the American Pavilion. It was going on for years. And apparently they staff it with film students who volunteer to work it. There's that word volunteer I talked to you about before. And this darling girl's coming up and she's filling my glass with red wine and I'm having a great time. We're chit-chatting at Cannes. And sure enough, she went to Framingham State College. And I'm thinking in my head, good for her. Gets herself on the red carpet at Cannes. I don't care that she's serving drinks. She's on the red carpet at Cannes. So we're chit-chatting. And if a few months later, she's not spending a week on my couch in Marina Del Rey, California, gets herself a couple of interviews out here on the Fox lot and a couple other places, I hook her up with a gal that I knew from Boston who moved out here to work for one of the biggest agencies, CA. Now, I don't know what became of her career, but you talk about LinkedIn. I mean, there's a great example of networking. And I'd be surprised if that girl didn't make it to exactly where she was going in her dreams for her career, for pulling that off, right? Good for her. When I started my my scholarship at Framingham State, I call it the Marcie Mills Dream Big Scholarship. And if you are outside the community center, you will see a bench nearby that says Marcie Mills Dream Big on it. It says, I think it says 1984. I actually should have been 1983. It was 1983 and a half. So there's that 4.5-year program. Be proud. I'm proud of that. And I call it Dream Big because I want to remind people to dream very, very big.
Yeah.
Because there's always people out there that will tell you you're dreaming too big. You can't achieve that. Don't go down to the newsroom and bother those guys, right? Reel it in a little. Know your place. Forget it. If I don't dream up here, then I can't hit here. If I dream here, I'll end up here, right? It's simple math.
Yeah.
So dream big, set your sights really high. There's thousands of kids on that campus. that have come from somewhere like you or a little bit differently, are going somewhere like you. Link in with all of them, right? Not just online, but personally link in, and your professors and people like Eric in the alumni office, right? Find places to volunteer in your community. Downtown Boston, you want to work in film and television? WGBH every year does a couple of times a year does their donation drive, right?
Yeah.
Sit there and work the phones. Who's sitting next to you? I don't know, but maybe
Yeah.
somebody. Or you want to get into a live performance and live theater. There are, I'm sure, theaters downtown Boston that need volunteers. You know, I used to say watch what's happening at your conference center in Boston, the big and the small one. See who's coming and sign up to volunteer and stand at the front desk and check people's tags, right? Things like that can be helpful. Think about the girl pouring me red wine on the red carpet at Cannes, and the next thing you know, she's on my couch. So good for her. So someone gave me a great piece of advice once when I was out of work for a little while, and they were saying, we all go right to Indeed and the job sites and look for the jobs that we might be qualified for and apply for them with all the other thousands of people. But aside from that, make a list of the top 15 to 20 companies that you want to work for someday. Big, small, they're located in Paris, they're located in Worcester, doesn't matter, right? Make a list and say to yourself, I'm going to talk to somebody within that company, hopefully somebody who's been there for a long time, been on the inside, right? Maybe helped build it. Talk to them about, what's the business structure, right? What's the org chart look like? Where could I fit in? Where does somebody like me, how do they get in the door? Trader Joe's was at the top of my list of companies. I was so inspired by them as a brand and completely cracking open, changing the grocery industry. I'm not in the grocery business. I may never be in the grocery business, but from a branding and marketing angle, there's a place where I want to get in and meet somebody and have a cup of coffee. So make a big long list, and let's not just do it when we're looking for a job. Let's always have that list in front of us with a highlighter, right? The old-fashioned way. And so there might be a company on there for 7 years, and I may not get in and get somebody to see me for until then, but it's going to be on my list, and someday I'm going to meet somebody to see what their org chart looks like.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the great things that radio gave me in my career was this opportunity to move around the country, right? I've lived in 6 cities: Boston, LA, San Jose, San Francisco, Boston, back to LA, worked for great companies. But the ability to move to another city, already with a job, pick the city that you want. My dream was always to live on the beach, right? I thought if I could open my kitchen windows and see the ocean, and guess what? I do. 25, 30 years later, I do, because the radio business gave me that opportunity. So under the heading of dream big, it isn't maybe just, what you're going to do for a living, right? But what else? What else can that career come with? I want to live in Paris. I want to work in Australia, right? Put that on your list of 8, maybe of when we make our list of what we want to do and who we want to work for someday. So just another thing I wanted to share.